Joining us now from our Abuja studio to review top headlines over the course of the week is public affairs analyst and associate professor at Bayes University, Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi. Good to have you on the show this morning. Let's begin with something that the Nigerian government did not take too kindly to, though, you know, it did sort of backtrack in terms of setting up a committee to look at the grievances of the U.S. authorities. What's your take on, you know, Nigeria making that list of visa bans by the U.S.?
Good morning and thanks for having me on. It's unfortunate that we got to this point, but in the life of every nation, you expect them to review policies, to review procedures for their own well-being. And the Trump administration said for the world goal that he'll be committed to protectionism. There's always going to be America first. And it permeates all the dimensions of social and political life. And if we see that happening at the level of visa restriction, to some extent, we may not blame them. You know, but I see it generally as for a call for us to also be very careful, to also be very concerned about policies, you know, about actions, and about procedures that will ensure that, you know, we will not just protect our own self, but will be respected further and more in a community of nations. You know, the restriction is not all, you know, all encompassing anyway. It concerns only immigrant visas. For non-immigrants, they are still free, you know, businessmen, students, officials, you know, and tourists, as it were. You know, so it's just for immigrants, you know. But again, it's a sign that there will be more strict, you know, in terms of issuance of visa, even to those in the non-immigrant aspect. You know, but what government needs to do really is to be more mindful about, you know, how we let our political boundaries loose. You know, our borders are porous. We've always said this, and no nation that wants to relate with us will take us very seriously if we cannot really define who the Nigerian is. Becoming a Nigerian is as cheap as anything you can imagine, because people stream in on a daily basis, and in streaming in, getting the symbol of identification, you know, they can emigrate to somewhere else and cause damage, you know, bearing the identity of the Nigerian. We haven't been salutary, we haven't been really definitive, we haven't been assertive, and we haven't been above board in terms of the management of who the Nigerian is. And that's why we see reflected, that's what we can see reflecting in the policy of the United States, in the new policy of the United States, because who is the Nigerian really? You know, how definitive are we in this regard? You know, it's a call to action. But again, I must commend the government for their reaction by setting up the committee. The United States is not a nation that we can confront. You know, the retaliation cannot happen in this circumstance. You know, we're a weaker nation. All we can just do is to be diplomatic about it. And if a committee has been set up and the committee will rightly address some of the concerns raised by the Trump administration, I think they are going to be open to new developments, and I think they can review the policy as it were. But it's also a call to action that we need to be more definitive. We need to be stricter on identifying who the real Nigerian is. For now, it's a very loose definition. It's so very easy to become a Nigerian, and through that route, you know, people can perpetrate actions that are inimical to the well-being of not just the other Nigerians, but other sections of the world. And that's what I think the U.S. is concerned about. So it's actually a call to action, and it's not all damning yet. You know, we can actually still do things that will make them review this action. But it's also gratifying to hear that the U.S. Congress is trying to look into it and to probably work against Trump in his supposed attempt at changing the narrative around the American society as an immigrant society, as a conflation of different nationalities and ethnicities. You know, but even before the Congress comes to help us, we need to be mindful of our own self. Let's check ourselves. And government setting up a committee seems like a step in that direction.
Well, Dr. Adeniyi, you mentioned the US being strict on issuing Nigerian visas and the fact that this only pertains to immigrant visas. But as we know, this is something that we've seen the strictness abound with tourist visas and even student visas, whereby Nigerian citizens are unable to get these visas. Now, we know that Nigeria and Eritrea have the highest number of immigrants in the United States. So this is perchance a reason that the Trump administration has chosen to do this. But should we worry about the company that we have found ourselves in? Countries like Myanmar and Kyrgyzstan and even Eritrea, who have recently gone through civil war. Should we be worried about this, being that our army actually even trains with the US Army?
Oh, of course, Ketura, I agree with you. It's actually very worrisome that we are being branded along those countries, war-torn countries, that are almost, that we can actually define as failed states. Being identified with them is actually not good for our brand, definitely reductionist, but we can take the positive, we can look at the silver lining, look at the good thing we can take out of this, which is actually that, it's actually a call to action that if we are being regarded, by the most politically and economically influential nation in the world, as being in the class of these nearly failing states, then we should begin to re-examine ourselves. It's an opportunity for us to be reflexive and to be reflective of our own condition. And it's not, like I said earlier, it's not completely damning yet. We can take it as it is. It is what it is. I'm not sure it's going to be reviewed tomorrow. I'm not sure it's going to be reviewed over tomorrow. It's something that has come in this circumstance. But what we need to do is just to sit back, reflect, deal with the situations that they have mentioned, the poor, appalling security conditions that they have mentioned, and see how we can get ourselves out of that wood. And I'm sure they are also, the world is integrated. They are all AS. They will listen to us. They can see things properly in the space of diplomacy and probably review their policy. Don't forget that we have a continuing, sustainable, historical, traditional, and trade relations with the United States. Our population privileges the United States almost always above all other nations in terms of immigration, in terms of trade, and in everything else. So it's not a nation that we can ignore. And to that extent, if our government responds positively, if they take action, focusing on their complaints, I think that policy will be reviewed, and again, we can be marked out of those damned or supposedly, damned nations that we have been identified with.
Now, Professor Adeniyi, critics argue that the ban is discriminatory, correct? And it's based on impermissible factors like religion. What's your take on that?
Well, it's neither here nor there, really. But if you look at it, the United States is an immigrant society. It's a conflation of different ethnicities, and largely most countries in North America are like that, So I wouldn't easily key into that idea, because if they have, showed preference, for multiple identities. I don't see them coming against any particular religion. Even in the wake of the 9/11 attack, we saw that, yes, they were circumspect about some nations, about some religion, about some ethnicities, but over time they reviewed those policies. They became less restrictive and less discriminatory, even if it was justified that if they became very nervous about some ethnicities and nationalities. But over time they reviewed this, they dumped down on that policy, believing that every Christian person cannot be bad, and neither can every Muslim person can be bad. It's not right, to tar everybody with one brush. I think they came to that realization and dumped down a little bit on their restriction, and that's why we have a smooth flow of immigration, as it were. But again, there are new concerns around the world, concerns around terrorism, concerns around unrest, and the U.S. plays is playing a very key role in the maintenance of peace as the so-called or the unsung policeman of the world. So in most cases they are likely going to be the target of any reappraisal or of any retaliation by aggrieved or agitated sections of the world. So against our background, they also have to be careful. This is not essentially speaking for them, but it's just saying that they also have to be careful. And being careful means being concerned about some nationalities, some ethnicities. There are about 190-something nations in the world, and 7 in the circumstance has been picked out. So if 7 has been picked out, really, it's a call on those nations that have been picked out to probably look internally. And don't forget what we always say, that all politics are local. If our national policies are right, we'll be respected in the Committee of Nations, and we won't be tied with nations, that are perennially in crisis, like we have just like it has just been done. So I think we can get out of these. Government's decision to set up a committee is in the right direction. Let us review the recommendations of the committee, work on them, improve on our situation, and I expect to be back in the circumstance. Audrey.
Exactly what I was going to ask you. What concrete steps, does Nigeria need to take to get off that list as quickly as possible? And you do say that it's not about religion and all of that, but some other critics say that this is more of an African ban, where you have about 4 African countries, Sudan, Eritrea, Nigeria, Tanzania, on that list, except, of course, for Kyrgyzstan and Myanmar.
Yeah, but again, if we say it is African, which section of the world really is continually having problems at the level of economy, at the level of terrorism, at the level of poverty? Which section of the world, or which continent of the world is almost always concerned about immigration, about migration? Of course, that it is predominantly African countries, African citizens. So if developed countries, civilized societies are coming up with policies, that are meant to restrict immigration into their country, it's going to affect more sections that are much more concerned about immigration, that regard migration as something that is almost doctrinaire. People that think that traveling or migration is synonymous with progress. We'll see how daft-eyed people are trying to immigrate, trying to cross the seas, and even dying in the process. People who believe that it is better for you to die trying than not to try at all. So this doctrine is still there, and it is because of a situation of hopelessness brought about by long years of failure of leadership. And it's okay that we are being brought to mind these concerns now. It's all right that we are being reminded, to concentrate on these downsides. And if it is being done, I think, we shouldn't feel too bad about it. All we need to do is just to rise above it, and find a way of navigating through these problems. Ghana is here. Ghana is not included. I'm not sure Kenya is included. South Africa is not included. So what is it that has made us, that has brought about our inclusion in the list? Those are the things I think we should really address. And before African countries were mentioned, actually, before now, we know some countries in the Middle East, cannot really go into the United States very easily. So if they are coming to us again, yeah, it's just, we can say, yes, it is discriminatory in some regards, because there will always be element of discrimination in it in any way, even if we're looking at the positive side. But discrimination, again, can bring up, there are some positives in discrimination. And I'm not going to feel bad about it. All I'm going to do really is just to look inwards, check myself and see how I can get out of it, even if I'm not being self-deprecating in the circumstance, Audrey.
Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, thank you very much for joining us. It's time for us to take a short break, but when we return, we will be coming back with you to discuss the rising insecurity in Nigeria and President Muhammadu Buhari's surprise at what that means for the country. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We are still joined by public affairs analyst and associate professor at Bayes University, Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi. Now, Dr. Adeniyi, I want to move on to the President Muhammadu Buhari's surprise at the rising insecurity in the country of Nigeria. Now, the Middle Belt Forum said if the president is surprised, that means he's not in charge, whilst the Benue leader said he hasn't been told the truth. How is it possible for the president of a sovereign nation to be unaware of the insurgency that's currently reigning in his country, particularly with all the media reports that have been abounding?
Yeah, Ketura, but I think the word surprise can be used in different contexts, if you permit me. You know, it could be that, you know, you don't know about something and it came to you as a shock, you know. And second, it could be that you have done everything possible to avoid a situation, you know, or rather you are not expecting something to happen or something to continue to happen, and it just continues, keep happening. So I would take the president's expression of surprise in the second contest, which is that, you know, he actually campaigned on the ground of insecurity. Mm-hmm. Insecurity or checkmating insecurity was one of his cardinal points. And when he came in, he said, you know, they were going to deal squarely with Boko Haram. And almost 5 years after his administration, Boko Haram is still raging. So he has probably done everything possible and is continuously doing it. But even at that, you know, the menace is still on. So what is it that is sustaining these people? You know, probably I think I want to see his expression of surprise within that context. Not that he doesn't know or that he's aloof, you know, or is vacated. He doesn't know what is happening. You know, well, people are free to interpret it in different ways. But I think I will go with that second option, even if I'm not speaking for the president. You know, because I can't imagine the president of a nation not being aware. You know, even if he's, I don't want to talk in terms of senility. Even somebody that is senile sometimes, you know, will come to consciousness, you know, and will realize his environment. And our president is not senile, you know, so I don't want to see it in the class of the false interpretation. I rather think that, you know, so much effort has been put into checkmating, dealing with Boko Haram and the problem of insecurity, but that despite all the billions of dollars spent, despite all the number of military men lost, you know, despite all the pronouncements, you know, all efforts, the menace is still raging. I think that's actually very concerning. That's actually very worrisome. The president is probably speaking in those terms, and it's again the pointer probably to the fact that, you know, he has also come to the realization of the fact that more things still, you know, have to be done. We've not done enough, you know. And we've always said that there are two approaches to dealing with this Boko Haram. One is physical, and the other one is the psychological. You know, the hard and the soft aspect of it. The soft aspect of it is to realize that Boko Haram is a creation of our problematic political economy, you know, that has created, you know, high number of people with lack of basic understanding, you know, high number of illiterates, people who cannot appreciate life, who think more in terms of eschatology, people who have been proselytized over the years, believing that life is better when you live it after life, you know, and life is actually meaningless, you know, because of this problematic belief system. You know, they just think that it's better to die than to live, you know, and it also speaks to the fact that there's a clash in civilization. You and I want to do everything possible to live for as long as possible, but this set of people does not even privilege, they don't believe in living at all, you know. So if they don't believe in living, they don't care if they take the life of the other person, you know. So there has to be a conscious reconscientization, conscious new creation of some level of awareness through structured and unstructured education. And the second aspect is actually the aspect that we are concentrating on, which is the physical, you know, confronting them physically in combats and all of that, you know. But this is also very dangerous. I think more effort should be put into the soft aspect, because the hard aspect hasn't worked in the last decade, you know, and perhaps we need again to deal with the problem of porous, you know, political boundaries.
Dr. Adeniyi, if I may,
that allows for easy recruitment of this personnel. Yeah.
If I may interject here, I mean, I'll still allow you to explore, you know, some of the options left for the Nigerian government, you know, to explore in pushing back the activities of Boko Haram and other security threats in the country. But the federal government has said that, you know, the security threats that we face are both external, internal, and multidimensional, and calling for a collaboration, between the federal government and all Nigerians. And in the same breath, the Senate has called for a declaration of a state of emergency as far as security is concerned in the country. Would you support a declaration of a state of emergency? And what would be the implications of that? Because there have been calls for the sack or resignation of security chiefs in the country. And the federal government doesn't seem to be looking in that direction at all.
Ngozi, when there is a crisis of this dimension, all you can actually imagine is that there will be different levels of opinion. People have different opinion, but at some point, the buck has to stop somewhere. A decision has to be taken in some quarters, But our prayer and our wish will always be that the right decision should be taken in any circumstance. And that's why leadership plays a key role in the administration of systems and societies and in dealing with crises like this, Again, we need to say that dealing with crisis is actually a multi-stakeholder affair. And that's what we're seeing panning out. That's what we're seeing playing out with the Senate involvement, The Senate came back from recess and launched straight into a matter as critical as insecurity. Of course, this is what you expect because they are ordinarily representative of the people. And we saw how it generated so much controversy on the floor. We do not expect anything less because they are leaders and they need to weigh in. So different opinion, and some people have also said, like you mentioned, that the service chief should, perhaps again, that might be right, even if you are not saying that the chiefs, are incompetent. We're only saying that, well, they've done their best, as it were, over the years. Perhaps they should just be allowed to go honorably so that we'll have other people coming in and bringing in new initiatives, new energy, So people are thinking in different respects. We can't deny this, and we do not expect anything less to happen, given the fact that there's no one that is secure. You and I are probably even afraid to travel from 100, 200 kilometers away from where we're living because you are not sure, God forbid, if you will return because of the level of kidnapping, a level of armed robbery, a level of insurgency around the place. These are things that have never happened in the history of this nation, and we're beginning to see it. People being shot in broad daylight, families being divided brutally, and it's actually unfortunate. So if we are seeing different opinion, I think it's in order, but most importantly, the buck has to stop somewhere, and that's why, fingers are being pointed in the direction of the president. But while we're pointing fingers at the direction of the president, we should also remember that other four fingers are pointing at us. Why? What does this mean? That dealing with security situation, dealing with crisis is a multi-stakeholder affair. We all have to be involved, even at the level of motivation, at the level of encouragement, or at the level of prayers, because the soldiers, the military men on the field, in the battlefield, are the main bridge between us and the terrorists, you see, and they are fighting for us. So if we have information that is correct, we need to feed them with it so that they can deal with the situation. So it's all involving, it's all inclusive, and we shouldn't shirk our responsibility in this regard, Ngozi.
So, Dr. Adeniyi, you're correct. Talking about pointing fingers to the president, just last week, Minority Leader Naya Aberibe called for the president to resign, right? Also calling for the impeachment of the president because he has failed to prefer solutions to the high insecurity rate right now in the country. What is your take on that?
Well, resignation is always a tall order in every system, even in the United States, the bastion of democracy, the beacon of freedom. Several times people have asked Donald Trump to resign. Of course, he didn't look that way. Even impeachment, we know how it is going to pan out. It's going to be acquitted on Wednesday. And so leaving office voluntarily like that through resignation, it's always difficult, Only Richard Nixon left it through resignation in the United States because the impeachment was almost imminent. And if it is difficult in such environment, you can expect it to be much more difficult in our own kind of environment, where a leader will just be told to resign just like that. Yeah, we are free to express our opinion, because we're probably rightly angry, by asking the president. It's not the first time we're going to hear it. Jonathan was once also asked to resign. The military were asked to resign, but we know it does not actually happen. With respect to the fact that we're just expressing our bitterness, how angry and agitated we are, I think it's okay that order is fine, but we know it's not going to happen. What should rather be the case is for the president to take it as a call to more action. To be much more proactive, to be much more engaging, and to let us know what is actually transpiring within the corridors of power. There's a problem of communication as well in the circumstance, because yes, the spokesmen are trying their best, but we need more information. In a time like this, we need information, even on a daily, probably on an hourly basis, so that we do know that, our leaders are working, that the government is not just resting on its oars in dealing with, the problem of insecurity. So it's more like a call to action, and if that kind of verdict is being passed on you, you should know that people are gradually losing confidence. And ordinarily, a leader is supposed to inspire, a leader is supposed to motivate and to galvanize, But if there's a failure in this regard, the citizens are right, if they respond by asking you to resign. But of course, we know it's not going to happen. I'd rather that the president takes it, as a call to action, and I'm sure he's got the ability and the competence to live up to the call, Oji.
Now, Dr. Adeniyi, we have about a minute left until we are unfortunately done with you. But let me take you back to the quote made by Femi Adesina, stating that President Buhari had hinged his campaign on tackling insurgency and Boko Haram, as you rightly said. Now, if we talk about the critics' response to that, including private military operative Ibn Barlow, when he discussed with Al Jazeera early January, he stated that President Buhari actually gave the order for them to stop combating Boko Haram in order to satisfy America. Give us your take on that.
Oh, like I said earlier, in a time, Yorubas have this proverb that Ojo Ikwiri Orisisho Belamari, loosely interpreted, at the time when the elephant is going to be murdered or killed, you see different kinds of knives, And that's what I said earlier. In any situation, in a crisis like this, you see different kinds of opinion, arguments, counter-arguments, and of course, democracy is about acrimony, it's about consensus and dissensus. So
all
we're
right,
having it.
Dr. Adeniyi, thank you very much. I love the Yoruba proverb that you left us with. It's something that we're going to have to get you to give us the translation of that again.